5. Tell the truth. Danny, go to your room, said Dad. Why? Because we said so, said Mum. Danny looked around the table, taking in the stony expression on his mum's and Dad's faces and the sombre expression on his sister's face. Is Lydia in trouble? He asked gleefully. Danny, I don't want to have to tell you again, Dad said softly. All right, I'm going, Danny grumbled as he left the room. Why do I always have to miss the good bits? It's not fair. Lydia watched as her mum stood up and went to close the living room door, firmly behind Danny. Here it comes, Lydia thought bitterly. She knew that Mr. Simmers had phoned her mum and Dad and told them about the sports cup being found in a locker. Lydia wished she'd been a fly on the wall when the headmaster had spoken to her parents. What had he said? How had he put it? And most importantly, how had Mum and Dad taken it? She was about to find out. Lydia glanced up at her parents. They were watching her. She immediately lowered her eyes. Don't do that. They think you're guilty if you do that. Lydia looked up. The silence in the room weighed down on her like concrete blocks on her chest. She tried to speak, but her tongue was so dry that it stuck to the roof of her mouth. Just when Lydia thought she'd scream if the silence lasted any longer, her mum broke it. We know you didn't do it, said Mum. I told your headmaster that it was ridiculous. You did? Lydia's eyes were as round as dinner plates. But how did that sports cup get into your locker? Dad asked. Tell the truth. Lydia turned to him. I don't know. She shook her head. I wish I did. Maybe the thief was disturbed and just put it in the first available locker, which happened to be yours, Dad suggested. Lydia shook her head. I always keep my locker locked. Then it must have been deliberate. Someone must have it in for you, said Mum. Don't talk nonsense, Dad chided. Why would anyone do that to Lydia? That sports cup didn't just walk into her locker. Someone put it there, someone spiteful, vicious person who wanted to see Lydia get into trouble. Mum snapped back. Next you'll be telling me that it's the same person who shot President John Kennedy, Dad said scornfully. I didn't say it was a major school conspiracy. All you meant was that the CIA or the FBI or the BBC or the RSPCA have it in for our daughter, said Dad. Well, if you're not going to take this seriously, Mum sniffed. You're wrong. I am taking this seriously, Dad said icily. Dismayed, Lydia watched the anger and frustration being batted back and forth between her parents. Mum and Dad, who usually only argued about who would get which section of the Sunday papers first, were quarrelling with each other. So what are we going to do? Mum asked Dad. I don't see there's much we can do. To think that my little girl... I want to go to another school. The words fell out of Lydia's mouth before she realised what she was saying. Dad's eyes narrowed. Why? Did you do it? Lydia stared at her father, shocked. Ben, what a thing to say! Mum sounded as shocked as Lydia. I didn't mean it that way, said Dad impatiently. But if she didn't do it, why does she want to run away? Lydia has no intention of running anywhere, said Mum through thinned lips. I don't believe Lydia stole the cup for 1 second, but we can't get away from the fact that the cup was found in her locker. Who can get away from the fact when you keep dwelling on it like that? Mum said bitterly. I just don't like the idea of anyone thinking that my daughter is a thief. No one in their right mind would think that. How could two people agree with each other, yet still argue about it? But that was exactly what Lydia's mum and dad were doing. It was like watching a tennis match. Why, where, how, who, back and forth, and all the time one word kept playing over and over in Lydia's mind as she watched. Thief. Lydia put her hands over her ears to stop her head from bursting. Stop it! She screamed. Stop talking about me as if I wasn't here. I didn't take the rotten, stupid cup. I didn't. I Lydia looked from her dad to her mum and back again. Mum's eyes flashed like lightning, her lips a hard slash across her face. Whereas Dad had a questioning look in his eyes and he couldn't hide. He didn't think for a moment that Lydia had stolen the cup, but Lydia could see the word but written all over his face. Mum's angry, and Dad doesn't know what to think, Lydia realised sadly. Strange, but Lydia had been sure it'd be the other way round. Lydia, what were you doing alone in the assembly hall after school on the night the cup was taken? Lydia's mum asked. I wasn't alone. Mum, Anne Turner was with me. Only the caretaker didn't see her. You weren't alone, Dad turned quickly. Why didn't you tell that to Mr. Simmers? Because I didn't want to get Anne into trouble as well, Lydia replied. And that was the truth, but what good did it do her? Lydia could still remember Anne's malicious smirk in the classroom earlier, and Anne was the one who told everyone about the cup being found in Lydia's locker. Understanding burnt through Lydia as she realised that Anne didn't like her that much, that Anne had never liked her much. But why? Why? Lydia, it's not a question of getting Anne in trouble as well, Dad frowned. She can tell the headmaster that you didn't do it. Lydia shook her head. Anne left the school before me, she admitted. Silence. Why on earth were the two of you hanging around after school? Dad asked furiously. Lydia chewed on her bottom lip but didn't answer. Any explanation now would just make her look even more guilty. What was she supposed to say? I was going to take the cup so I could join the Cosmics, but I chickened out. I touched it, but I didn't take it. It's got my fingerprints on it, but I'm innocent. Yeah, right. Anne and we were just talking. If I tell Mr. Simmers about Anne now, it'll look like I'm just trying to pin the blame on her, Lydia replied at last. And it wouldn't do any good anyway. She couldn't know my locker combination. No one said a word. Dad, Mum, please let me go to another school, Lydia begged. Lydia, you are going to stay at Collivale School and you're not going to bow your head or look away from anyone. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Mum said stonily. It's not that simple, Mum. Oh, yes, it is, Mum argued. If you walk around with your chin on the pavement and skulk in corners at the first sign of anyone you know, everyone will think you're too afraid to face them. Do you understand? Yes, Mum, Lydia whispered. Only Lydia knew it really wasn't that simple. What about earlier at school when Sean Lucas had called her a thief in front of the whole class? Lydia knew she wasn't a thief. No way was she a thief. So why had she spent the next half hour crying in the toilets? Dad stood up and walked over to the window. He stared out into the night, his whole body held rigid as if he was in pain. Lydia held her breath. Maybe that way she could hold on to the tears in her eyes. Mum took hold of Lydia's hand and squeezed it gently. This is it, Lydia thought miserably. This is the worst moment of my life. She was soon to find out that she was wrong.